All right, Chaz, as usual, let's get right to it. First series of the season in the books from Great American Ballpark for the Reds, and the Giants take 2 of 3 from the hometown team. So what is your way too early takeaway from the 2025 Cincinnati Reds?
Yeah, it's just 3 games into a 162 game season, but it was a reminder specifically Sunday of the starting point about where these Reds are coming from. You look at the story specifically of Sunday's game, it was defense and base running. And especially when you counter that with the way the Giants looked in the field, that was the difference in the game, and that was the difference in the series.
It was. That's the way Sunday went. That's the way the first series went. And this is how we say welcome into the first in-season edition of Power Stacks with Giesenslaw and Goldsmith, proudly part of the Growler Podcast Network. So, Chaz, we're going to do this, try to do it most of the time on Sundays at the end of a weekend series to really set people up for the week that's coming forth that starts on Monday. And so here we are to do this, to get you set for a week that the homestand continues for the Reds, and then they head out for their first road trip. But let's jump back into some of the things that you just touched on off the top and kick off the show with the fact that my impression of Terry Francona is, especially based on some of the things he said postgame on Sunday, is that things will be addressed, and I feel like his voice will carry certainly a certain weight with it when those things are addressed. So some of the things that you touched on that happened in series number 1, do you think that's how it's going to play out in terms of correcting mistakes and moving on?
Yeah, Jacob Hurtubise made the team because of his heads-up baseball. And then, of course, on Sunday, he made the worst heads down. That's not a term, but you know what I'm saying. Base running decision that you'll see runners on second and third. Hurtubise basically runs right into an out, setting up a double play, taking a run off the board. Francona really stressed that they're going to have those conversations directly with the players, specifically to make sure they understand the why. And now, of course, you know, this Hurtubise play shouldn't need to be discussed, but, you know, internally it should have been addressed and corrected previously. But that's one of a series of plays that kind of followed this theme for me from Sunday. You've got, you know, Ellie and kind of the rushing the throw to CES. You've got the scoop by CES, which allowed the first runner in that inning to score. Taylor Rogers should have done a better job holding the runner on second base as he ended up stealing third. Candelario, sure, you can debate the replay review and overturn, but Candelario's got to make sure he gets that tag down, and then Hurtubise running the bases as well. All of this are the things the Reds are going to need to do to win.
They're little things. And how many times have we heard that phrase, little things in baseball, and little things matter? We heard that a lot in spring. And the play you're speaking of specifically in the 8th inning, the Reds are down 6-3. You got 6 outs left to get 3 runs, and they had the perfect start to the inning. First 2 hitters reach base, and they can both run in Blake Dunn and Jacob Hurtubise. And so that starts off as perfectly as it can. Matt McLain, kind of a swinging bunt, advances the runners. There's no harm there, but that play left Ellie De La Cruz in the on-deck circle to end that inning when the Reds had a chance to at least get 1 or 2, if not more, back based on how that inning started. And those are the things that, felt a little bit familiar in terms of things this team is trying to avoid this season. And that's something that's certainly been talked about from the start of spring training into the start of this season. So let's get to Charlie's notebook now. And the notebook, as we pointed out last time on the very first edition, the preseason edition of this podcast, this is where your thoughts, observations, and other things throughout the week end up. So in your notebook this week, there has to be something about Spencer Steer, because Spencer Steer became even a different story the day before opening day when Terry Francona said, forget everything I've said about Spencer Steer, because the injury to Austin Hayes and then Steer essentially talking his way onto the roster as a designated hitter only. Am I reading that right? And where does it stand now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Steer actually, there was a conversation about whether or not he should have been on the roster already because he was taking very quality at-bats on the backfield to spring training. And they put even more weight until like the Reds had 2 exhibitions on Tuesday and Wednesday. And like Spencer Steer looked like a guy who was ready to go. I do think at the plate, Steer hasn't had the results. I think he looks fine. I think he's taking pitches. I think he's had a couple nice quality at bats that haven't resulted in the base hits and the power that the Reds desperately need. But my biggest takeaway from the week is his throwing is even further back than maybe I recognized. Spencer Steer is basically relearning how to throw, he said, and Derek Johnson is teaching him. I get to the game early on Saturday, and who's out in right field? It's Steer throwing with Colin Cowgill, the outfield coach. There's Derek Johnson, standing right next to Steer. There's the head athletic trainer standing right there, and Freddie Benavidez monitoring as well. And Steer just basically did some soft toss for 15 minutes. And again, relearning how to throw. I talked to Steer about adjusting his throwing mechanics.
Well, yeah, I had to compensate for the injury, so my throwing mechanics kind of got to a point where my body could throw without, I guess I just found a way to throw with the least amount of pain as possible, and yeah, just kind of turned into some sloppy mechanics that even put even more stress on the shoulder, but yeah, just trying to find something that works at this point.
What's the best advice DJ gave you?
I guess the biggest thing I'm fighting right now is guarding my shoulder. It's tensing everything up because my body thinks it's going to hurt when I throw. So it's kind of just fighting that off and trying to keep everything loose.
Is it feeling fine though?
Yeah, it's an extremely frustrating process, as you can tell when I'm talking about it. So just trying to stay optimistic and just try to stack up some good days.
Last thing, I'm not overreacting to opening day at all, but how important is it going to be just to get more at bats, get more comfortable to get hot at the plate?
Yeah, baseball happens. I've had hat tricks before, and I think it's a little magnified because it's opening day and it's the beginning of the season. So yeah, I'm not worried one bit.
It's a pretty revealing, short couple of answers about his throwing, and we knew this was no secret. When Terry Francona made this decision about Spencer Steer being on the roster, he said he's going to DH only right now, that he's not ready to play in the field, any position where he would have to throw. But what he told you about relearning the process and his body kind of fighting that process, that seems, as you said, like maybe the road might be a little bit longer than some of us thought.
And it's the yin to the yang of what last season was for him. The shoulder subluxation doesn't impact his swing. I really do believe that when I'm told that from Steer and from others too. But Steer said last year the pain and the process that he was going through and the grind of it all, that weighed on him mentally. And that probably did impact him some at the plate. Now, of course, he's not throwing at all now, but is the process of learning how to throw again weighing on him? Is the absence of being able to play the field weighing on him? Terry Francona was talking about guys in DH-only roles, and Tito said it's easy when you're getting hits. It's hard when you're not getting hits, and Steer's a guy who loves to be in there in the action. So if anything, his struggles are probably at the plate or probably a result of he's just pressing a bit, but I do think where he's at physically and mechanically as a true hitter, I do think that's fine to have him in the lineup.
Yeah, and it was Francona also said, look, it's not going to be every day. So he was the designated hitter in 2 of the first 3 games, and I would think that was going to continue to not necessarily have him be the guy every day in that position, but something to watch for sure, because you want Spencer Steer on this team. You want a good, healthy Spencer Steer at his best in the batter's box and certainly in the field where he's proven he can play anywhere pretty much that you put him, but you got to be able to figure out a way to get past this unfortunate shoulder issue and get him back to throwing the baseball the way that he can. Topic number 2, we both know, and it's cliche to say no one player is bigger than the team and the game is bigger than any one player, but all of last season when we talked about what the Reds were missing without Matt McClain, just through the first 3 games of this season, there's kind of an exclamation point on, boy, look at what the Reds missed a season ago without Matt McClain.
Yeah, if the Reds don't implode in the 9th inning on Thursday and in the 8th inning on Sunday, what we're leading this podcast off with is the Reds have Matt McClain back, and what does that mean for the stakes of the season? Like, wins above replacement's a stat, but there's some meaning behind that. Some players grind and drag you to wins in a way that when you don't have, the absence impacts the team the other way defensively. And specifically the way that McLean was all over the field on Saturday, the way that the Reds kind of felt sleepy, they felt off, Justin Verlander was dealing, and McLean picked up the team and dragged them through that. Then again on Sunday, he had a big homer as well. Since the first day of spring training, he's looked healthy. That's what I've been told about Matt. All that matters is he looks healthy. Now, there was some rust then in spring training, some swing and miss stuff, and I'm sure he'll face some similar grinds over the course of this year where there's some rust at the plate, but the defense isn't going to slump. What's been on full display is with the double play turns with Ellie and the plays McLean makes on his own, the defense significantly improves with Matt out there. And I mean, he's this team's second best player.
I think Terry Francona said what a lot of us are thinking when we watch those two play second and short together, and that is, he said De La Cruz, you can tell, is happy that McLean is back. And I think that goes beyond just the fact that they're good friends. How specifically do you think your defense as a shortstop in Ellie De La Cruz is impacted by having someone who plays second base, also a shortstop like Matt McLean on the other side?
Yeah, I think this side of it's more intangible. Like, this isn't anything against Jonathan India, but Matt McLean's the kind of guy who when Ellie needs to lock in, Matt claps his hands. Matt's like, let's go. Matt gives him a pat on the back. Matt gives him a hug. They have that type of relationship. It takes a certain type of relationship for that to be the maximum version of itself. And that's what Matt and that's what Ellie De La Cruz have. Like, there were communication mistakes between Ellie and between Jonathan India last year. And again, this isn't about India, but it's about having a chemistry and an instinct nature that works. And I mean, that is completely in sync between Ellie De La Cruz and Matt McLean.
What have you heard from Matt McLean just being back? Every time all the questions early in the season are about being back and being healthy and being this and being that, and the guy's got a smile on his face. That enduring what he endured last year, missing the entire season, have you seen any residual of that perspective that he may have gained from that time away?
It's funny, he doesn't show it. And my take on this would be he doesn't show it, but boy, his teammates do. And, I was
Right.
talking to Lodolo about this. I was talking to Friedel about this. Like, when McLean makes that play in the sixth on Saturday, diving way to his left, the same play that he tore his labrum on, by the way, in spring training in 2024. Matt shakes it off, kind of shows a little smile. But Lodolo and Friedel were like, as fired up as they could possibly be. They were like, yes, this is what we were missing for all of 2024. And I think there's a part of him that lifts everyone up with him in a way that star players who play the game the right way so consistently do. And that's what Matt McLean is.
No doubt. All right, the question that popped up on opening day as the Reds took a 3-2 lead to the ninth inning in front of a packed house on baseball's biggest day in Cincinnati. The question is, who's going to close that game? And on opening day, like every other day in the series, we knew it wasn't going to be Alexis Diaz. What's the latest that you have on Diaz and his status, not only health-wise, but maybe how he's being perceived once he is back with this team?
Alexis Diaz on Saturday, I watched the video of it, was in the bullpen. He was carrying like weighted bags and going through the rotational force that you do when you go downhill off the mound. And he was working on his mechanics, doing a similar thing with resistance bands attached to his hips. And, asked Terry Francona about it on Sunday. He was like, Alexis has to get his mechanics in sync to a point where he's set up to be consistent and be healthy. And my question, I didn't ask this to Francona, but my general question about that is, couldn't that have been done in the offseason? And if the mechanics were that much of a concern, well, why was he going through a full spring training before he got there? I think it's very, realistic to bring up questions about Alexis Diaz right now. Why wasn't he able to throw strikes in spring training? Why weren't some of these adjustments and improvements made during spring training? How is Diaz approaching spring training overall? I get the sense that Diaz lost the closer role before, he ended up going on the IL. So there's a lot that the Reds have an all-star closer-shaped hole at the back of their bullpen And yeah, I do think Emilio Pagan can do a nice job in that role, but he doesn't have that upside yet. And the Reds are missing what Diaz was, but it's clear that Diaz has a a lot of work to do and a lot of improvements tangibly that he needs to show before he's back on the mound. And until then, again, the Reds are missing what Alexis Diaz really used to be for them.
Yeah, and listen, about the bullpen, as Francona has said, we don't have a designated closer right now. Emilio Pagan was the guy on Saturday, got it done on Saturday. But there was also the conversation with Francona on Sunday morning discussing the bullpen when he said right now, and I think that's the qualifier that we have to put on all of these things, because something like that, it could change day to day. But he said right now, it feels like if there's a fire to be put out, that Tony Santillan is the guy to put that out. That's a big vote of confidence early in the season. And if that were to grow from there, then certainly, like we've talked about before, Santillan is also an end-of-game option, right?
Let's go through these guys in the bullpen real quick and
Okay.
what their roles are. So Santillan definitely seems to be at the top of the depth chart. He'll probably get most of his work early on where, are there 2 runners on and it's the 6th? Maybe you're following the starting pitcher and it feels like the game's on the line there. It's like I think of TJ Antone in that role in 2021. We've had some other Reds pitchers do that. It was Alexis Diaz's role in 22 before he became the closer. If that situation doesn't come up until the 9th and everything's clean before then, Santillan seems to be at the top of the depth chart. If not, they started opening day. I believe they used Pagan in the 7th. I want to say it was the 7th or the 8th. Pagan, there seems to be more of a priority now on let's make sure we're not overexposing the lack of depth in this bullpen, which we saw on opening day by having one of Santillan, Pagan, or Barlow saved for the 9th. And because Santillan will likely pitch earlier, Pagan might get more chances in the 9th going forward. Francona loves how his strike throwing consistency matches with, he wants a strike thrower in the 9th inning. Barlow, he showed a lot of faith in him. He'll be in this high leverage mix. Taylor Rogers, he was fine on Sunday. Kind of some errors cost him the inning. But just look at how they used him, or really how they didn't use him. That was not a sign of, not encouragement, but, actions speak louder than words. On opening day, he wasn't in the picture whatsoever. And then on Sunday, he just got to face a pocket left, right, left. And even though the Reds were losing, Francona pulled him for Barlow. So I'm not expecting him in the high leverage mix as much. If they need a lefty to get a tough out, it seems like that would be Sam Moll. But then the wild card, here's Graham Ashcraft, who sure did look good on Saturday.
I mean, getting going in the 8th in that scenario, it was pretty cool. That was the most adrenaline rush I've ever had in a baseball game. So it was pretty fun.
Kind of a cliche, but, empty the tank, let those cutters go as hard as they can go.
Yeah, the adrenaline's pumping, you got one. That's just kind of what I went after, just go out there and let it rip and leave it all out on the field.
You almost have to calm yourself, or maybe you're not there yet.
Oh, no. Before I got on the mound in the bullpen, I was having to slow my breathing down because I was juiced up. I was fired up.
And then it kind of ended. You didn't get a full chance to celebrate because it ended with that play in the field, but kind of where you're feeling it in that moment, finishing that inning the way you did.
Oh, yeah. It was just one of those things. I honestly was kind of blacked out. I wasn't really realizing what was going on other than just trying to execute pitches and get guys out. And it happened the way it was supposed to happen,
I love that. I almost blacked out. That's good to hear. But listen, for the way that guy pitches, even when he was a starter, for him to say that's the most adrenaline I've ever had in a baseball game, that's strong.
And this is why since 2022, you've been hearing whispers that Graham Ashcraft is going to be. He just fits, doesn't he?
Yeah. Yeah, it kind of feels that way. And so you want this transition, whether it's for now or forever, you want it to go smoothly. But Graham Ashcraft is not someone that, nothing about him is easing into anything. Whether it's a start or an appearance out of the bullpen, he's scorched earth when he gets out there. And so I think you have to protect him a little bit, maybe, from himself with the situations. And I think that's why I do think this is the right way to go about this. The Reds may get desperate. If they continue to have end of game issues, you may get desperate in terms of looking for a solution. And Graham Ashcraft, if he stays the way that he is, could force himself more quickly into that conversation. But I think this is the right approach. And for the Reds, I think it's exciting to think about the possibilities.
Yeah, they threw Graham Ashcraft into a high leverage situation right away. 1-run game, 8th inning. And we talked a second ago about the lack of, I don't want to say lack of confidence in Rodgers, but again, look how they used him. Actions speak
Yeah.
louder than words. You look at the lack of willingness to have Sam Mullen there against right-handed pitching. Ian Jabot pitched well on Sunday, but I do get the sense that maybe he's gone down a rung since opening day. So, I mean, Ashcraft's rising up this bullpen, and I do think he really turned some heads on Saturday. Now that he made that statement, honestly, I see his role continuing to rise, and he could end up in the 9th inning more quickly just because of how impactful that cutter can be and how much he seems to again suit the role from a personality perspective.
Let me ask you one quick question about the Reds offense and everything that I looked at throughout the weekend through the 3 games against the Giants. I ran through the filter of it's the first 3 games of the year, and you saw Webb, Verlander, and Robbie Ray, who've got Cy Youngs to burn and experience and all of those things. So it was a tough start. What was your overall impression of the lineup, the production, and maybe the use of those offensive players by Terry Francona?
Yeah, there were good at bats. There were some line drives that didn't pan out. Sunday, there were some home runs that the wind blew in. But 2 things stood out in general about the lineup. First, what were we all talking about at this point last week was the bottom half of the lineup and the outfield. And when you look at kind of a rough, concerning start from Jake Fraley, you look at Gavin Lux, who did more have some bad luck than not. But you look at that, and then, on Sunday, you had Blake Dunn in there against a lefty over TJ Friedel. Like, the outfield certainly didn't do anything to answer those questions, and same with Jose Trevino. Then Austin Wynns homered on Sunday, but I'm not expecting a ton of those. The other thing is the lineup construction. So Francona's committed to having Ellie hit third. On opening day, you saw Ellie finish the game in the on-deck circle, and then the big inning on Sunday was the 8th, Ellie in the on-deck circle as Espinal hits into a double play. So are they maximizing the top 3 of their lineup right now by having, Friedel trying to be a spark plug, get on base any way he can guy against righties, and having Espinal bumped up there against lefties? Again, we need a lot more time to come to these conclusions, but this lineup construction at the top in particular is one tangible way early on that you're seeing Terry Francona show it's important to him.
Tito's top 3. If you missed the first show of the season, each week we're going to kind of pick apart whether I think if it's a direct quote, certainly, because the Reds now have a very quotable manager in that chair, or if it's a quick story from Terry Francona or about Terry Francona. I love the fact that on opening day, he offered up that he started the day in a dentist chair because his teeth came apart in the middle of the night because he was kind of worked up about getting the season started and starting in Cincinnati. Stuff like that is good. Tito's top 3 from your perspective. Let's go with number 1, and there's a certain piece of office furniture involved, right?
Well, actually, not a piece of office furniture, a piece of dugout furniture. What I wrote in the outline, was Tito's chair, and I haven't told you this story yet. So it's opening day, and it turns out Francona forgot one thing: where am I going to sit? And so they actually brought out one chair, kind of like a wicker chair type thing. They would have put a cushion on it. It wasn't quite as sturdy. Then they bring out a kind of bar stool with a back and a cushioned seat, kind of a taller chair that nestles into that little nook in the dugout between the steps and the bench. And Francona's like, yeah, I like that one. So that chair, I believe, is still in the dugout, but I didn't see Francona sit in it once. Francona, and you all saw this on TV all weekend, was standing on the top rail, arms over the dugout, hung over. He's got a piece of paper to his left that's like nestled into a wedge in the padding. And turns out he didn't need the chair after all the conversation about it.
Yeah, but he's going to need that chair. He's going to need that chair. We all need a place
He'll
to
have
sit.
to sit eventually.
He's going to have to sit eventually, but we all like the top step, top rail guy that Terry Francona is right now. Number 2 in this segment, there was a moment on Saturday, and we've already discussed the way that game ended with Emilio Pagan on the mound, and Pagan picks up the save. Reds get a win. First win of the season, first win as Reds manager for Terry Francona. And as he is the first person into the media interview room post-game, he's talking to you guys downstairs, and Pagan shows up. You take it from there.
Yeah, Pagan dropped the game ball on the podium desk that Francona was sitting at, and kind of what I heard behind the scenes was Francona did not want to make a big deal of it at all. That this was his first win. Like, we've probably all seen the video in Chicago. The White Sox manager Will Venable got his first win, and they push him through the clubhouse and they throw all sorts of water on him. Francona did not have that.
It wasn't
moment.
all water.
I thank you. I think Francona. I think Francona wanted to avoid that moment. And I think what you saw was Pagan saying, I want to make sure he has it. And that led to, again, after it wasn't a topic of conversation in the clubhouse, led to him getting that game ball.
For a guy with the World Series resume and all these wins and 24 years in the dugout, this is not the first time we've kind of seen Francona deflect. Doesn't want anything with this team seemingly to be about him from the start, going back to the first game against the Guardians in Arizona when he went to the other game, because he didn't want this to be about him. So it seems to be that maybe there's a theme there, that he's come to this team wanting to put the focus on the guys in the clubhouse, knowing that he's toting around some World Series rings and a reputation, and wanting that to be part of the backseat or the backstory so far, at least to get things going.
Yeah, it's part of his way to like support the guys too. I think you saw another moment like that after Sunday's game where there was the stolen base at third overturned. Was he out? Was he safe? Did Candelario get the tag down? And you saw Francona do something that David Bell never did, which was challenge the replay view official call. Francona was like, not challenged, literally challenged metaphorically in the post-game comments, saying that, like, I don't know how you could have seen enough to overturn that. He didn't go on about it, but that's what he said. Yeah. And that was a way of picking up Candelario, who, tried to make the play. And by Francona picking up Candelario, who had a terrible game defensively on Sunday, that's at least taking publicly one play off of Candelario's plate and maybe helping the clubhouse in that way.
Yeah. All right. Number 3 in Tito's top 3. And this is something that I think as the game evolves and the game has become younger and the game has become, for the kids, it's been hip. We've seen this now for a number of years. And we had the Viking helmet here in Cincinnati for a while. Different teams have different things. What do we know about dugout or clubhouse celebrations through the first 3 games of the season for these Reds?
Yeah, so the new home run celebration is they've got a money gun with no label. I tried to find the specific brand, but I couldn't find it. And they fly out fake dollar bills to celebrate a home run at the guy who got it. I asked McClain, I asked Friedel. I haven't been able to track down the origin of this yet. Okay. If I had to guess, not that this came from Terry Francona, but I could see this being adjacent to Terry Francona. Okay. Who, line number 1 on Tito, the guy loves playing cards, and the guy loves playing cards with the players, and that's a huge part of who he is. Tito also gave out $100 bills to guys who played the game, quote unquote, the right way in spring training. So, heads up base running, making the right read, big cutoff man moments, stuff like laying down a bunt. So that made me think of the dollar bills. It's all a casino theme, I understand, for the celebrations this year. So you'll see them roll the dice, when they get to like first base. You'll see them do the slot on the slot machine when they get to second base. And then, of course, when you get home, you got the full cash gun celebration. Now, my 2 questions was who shoots off the gun and then who picks the dollars up. And I was told on Saturday it was Hunter and Martinez manning the gun. And then they looked around and there was a mess on the floor. So who but stand-up guys, Carson Spires and Jacob Hurtubise, pick up the cash to be reused?
That's very nice. They did miss one because I was in the clubhouse the other day and I noticed there was a stray bill on the floor that somebody missed. But I like what we've seen so far of that. And I loved the story that you wrote right before the season started about the $100 bills in Arizona. Those are the kinds of things that you think about. How do you reinforce things with a group of professional athletes, but at the same time, have some fun with it and do those things. And when you wrote that story about what happened in spring, and especially about when they would bring in someone from maybe the minor league camp and do the same thing, again, just speaks to the closeness and I guess what's being built here in the clubhouse with Francona and what he's doing.
He's got a way about him. Like what a
Yeah.
lot of managers from his generation would do is, they'd come in, they'd yell, they'd make a point. They're like, we're not going to
Right.
stand for this, and kind of
Right.
scare the players straight. And you know what? That does work sometimes. Francona scares players straight in the kindest way that you could possibly imagine, through like support and reinforcement and let's play cards. But then when we're playing cards, I'll tell you something you might not want to hear. His ability to walk both of those lines is what makes Francona Francona.
That's outstanding. Go back to Charlie's chalkboard and check out the story about the $100 bills. It's good. So the week ahead for the Reds, you remain home for 3 against the Texas Rangers. First road trip is 4 in Milwaukee. And the series will start, the first 3, obviously, at Great American Ballpark against a Rangers team that's off to a good start this season, against a Rangers team that has firepower, has Adolis Garcia. The Reds are going to see Jack Leiter and Nathan Eovaldi in the first series. And we're also, from a Reds perspective, going to get to see Brady Singer. So, for anyone not watching or not listening to this beyond Monday, what's the book on Singer as the season starts?
Yeah, Singer's a fascinating case of pitching development, because Singer, since the day he got drafted as a high pick, unbelievable sinker, unbelievable slider, sinker, slider, sinker, slider. And then basically it's been a 7-year odyssey to try to find a third pitch. Like we saw this with, what's an example? Hunter Green. He tried the changeup. Then he actually pretty quickly pivoted towards the splitter, and splitter unlocked a whole new gear for Hunter, becoming an all-star last year. Brady Singer has been, with one organization, similar pitching minds, a similar front office trajectory in Kansas City through his whole career. He, I think, had been working on a cutter in spring training as a way to kind of separate from the sinker with something going the other way, and something that's a little sharper, specifically to give him an option versus left-handed hitting. The whole game with Singer is, can he get lefties out? And if he can, it'll be a great year. And if he can't, he'll be a number 4, number 5 starter who, throws 180 innings. He worked on that cutter this spring. Let's see how it looks.
Yeah. He makes 25, 30 starts every year and eats innings. And if you look at what he's done in Kansas City, every year his innings have gone up. Starts are on that same trajectory. And so innings are important from the rotation. So even if he doesn't completely develop what you're talking about or develop into the person or pitcher you're talking about, you can continue to eat innings. There's value in that, and the Reds are going to get a look at that for the first time on Monday against the Rangers. This is the point in the show, Charlie, where we say to all of our friends or anyone who would like to, like, subscribe, right? You want to run down some of that we can do here to continue to follow this Power Stacks podcast with Giesenslaw and Goldsmith.
Brian, you caught me off guard. I was not prepared. I did not have the outline in front of me. But now, what did that take? It took 5 seconds for me to pull up. You can watch on YouTube. You can click the bell for notifications at Power Stacks. We're on all podcast platforms under Power Stacks. You can find us on Twitter. You can reach out. We'd love to incorporate listener questions as a part of this as well. Find us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube. And again, you said friends or no. If you do any of those things, you're a friend. And so from me to you, I say thank you.
Well said. Well said. And yeah, part of the Growler Podcast Network. Thankful for that and glad to do this. We're off and running now. We have a preseason show. We have an in-season show, and we're good to go. So check it out. Power Stacks with Giesenslaw and Goldsmith. We'll see you next time.